wanted to not take more than a minute to talk about CMR Consulting. The reason why we started the company was because of my experience since 1984 in the oil and gas industry, starting back with the ERCB, and recognizing that as I moved from geology into stakeholder engagement, that there was a gap. And that gap was the fact that a lot of organizations would jump into doing actions relating to stakeholder engagement around making up documents, doing open houses. They were moving forward with all these activities and actions, but they didn't really have a strategy. They didn't really understand how they tied into their overall approach. They didn't necessarily have means in place to measure what they were doing. So this is why I wanted to just give you a little bit of a snapshot about the fact that we work in oil and gas and that we also have worked in provincial and municipal government as well as in private sector as well. Strategy is really just a roadmap to reaching your goals. And with all of our clients, with the 7 different service offerings that we have, we always emphasize that we need to start with that strategic base. It's that big picture thinking, it's that 360 view of what goes into a planning approach. So I want to go through the different components. I know that several of you have probably written strategy, but for those of you that haven't, this will be maybe new for you. The first thing we like to look at is audiences or your stakeholders. There's a number of variables to look at when it comes to understanding the different audiences that you're communicating with. And I like to do an assessment that talks about, as I've said here, the levels of interest and influence, but it goes deeper than that. It's understanding what you need from them, what they need from you, what's important to them as what's important to you. You also need to understand how these audiences or these stakeholders can block your efforts when you're moving forward. It's important to be aware of who they are, what's important in order to effectively communicate. Another thing is a lot of companies have done SWOT analysis. That's your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And one of my clients, I remember when I first started working with them, said, "Oh yeah, we do SWOTs all the time." And I said, "Great, what do you do with them?" And they said, "Well, we just do them." And they didn't really know how to integrate them into their strategy. So your strengths and weaknesses look at your internal considerations, the things that you're strong at, and obviously the things that you don't do quite as well. Your opportunities and threats are those things that are opportunities you can act upon, different opportunities. And threats are things that may or may not happen that will stop or prevent you from moving forward. But looking at the SWOT analysis and doing those are a key part to tying them into your strategy development. You need to understand that when you do these, you have to play them into your development of your plan. Key messages. Quite often, again, I worked with another client and we did an audit of the different communication tools, materials they had. And for every year, we saw a whole set of different key messages. And so if you're a stakeholder receiving all this information, you're going to be getting a lot of different kinds of messages. Your messages need to be consistent, they need to be relevant, they need to be meaningful, not just to the organization that's putting them out there, but also to the people receiving them. They have to understand, kind of the what's in it for me concept. Why is this important to me, what you're telling me? The messages need to be communicated internally to people in your staff as well as to externally to the people you want to communicate with and share information with. Goals and objectives, obviously part of the strategy is you need to understand where you're going in this roadmap. You need to define your high-level goals, what you hope to achieve, and your objectives are almost like sub-goals to help you get there. The next one is the action plan. As I said, most people will jump into doing those actions without the strategy. The action plan itself, it is a live document, and all the things that you do within that action plan need to deliver and align with everything that we've done around the SWOT analysis, your audience assessment, and everything needs to be reflected with your key messages again in that action plan. Your resources, part about doing a strategy is that you want to maybe do a lot of things, but you don't have maybe the financial resources or you don't have the human resources. We find that there's limits around how much can be done. So it's really important in a strategy to understand the timing and the finances and who's going to be doing the work to help bring these things together. We look at the outcomes, and are they measurable? Are they realistic? Are the goals we're setting, are they achievable? We need to be really clear with that at the front end, understanding that when you put something out there, you need to be clear on what you expect to see at the end. So a year from now, if this is your goal, a year from now, what's going to be different? You have to really define it so that you know where you're headed. And then with any good strategy, you want to have an evaluation component. You want to look at it regularly to ensure that you're meeting those objectives. And this becomes very important at a management level. We find that oftentimes companies do what they're used to doing all the time, putting out material to communities and to different stakeholder groups that is only meaningful to them and not to the community. And we need to ensure that there's some measurements in there that help us understand that this information is being valued and that they're doing the right thing and that the collaboration is there, and if it isn't, then changing their action plan to ensure that it's incorporated. Shifting attitudes and heightened awareness. We're finding in the industry and with all stakeholder engagement that, as we've already talked about today, that things are shifting. We've seen a change of the different communities with the right to know. They want the transparency. We've seen that in oil and gas with hydraulic fracking. The different additives that they're being used for fracking is a big hot topic right now. And we're encouraging a lot of our clients to ensure that there is that transparency around disclosing these types of information so that that's given out to the community, and so that they have a chance to work together and understand that there is a process in place to be accountable for the actions they have. Accountability from regulators. We're recognizing also that when we talk to communities that there's a lack of trust there. And we work closely with the regulators so that they know what we're doing, and we align so that we can ensure that we continue to share that information and to follow those rules. And often, like was already stated, going above and beyond those is really what the communities are looking for. Understanding the public's role and involvement in project approvals. This is changing the way that we're doing things means that we need to also, as we're talking about today, collaborating around different synergy opportunities to ensure that we engage the public in the decisions that are being made with the project early on, not partway through, not once approvals are in place, but early on in the process. And that is shifting and changing. Sustainability of the environment. That's a whole topic we could talk about for a long time, but really I noticed it a lot with our First Nation communities. They talk about a 7-generation window for where they like to say that the way the First Nations view impact today, whether it's a positive or negative impact, is that it does have outcomes 7 generations in advance. So we certainly, when we work with them, we recognize that we're not talking about now, we're not talking about a year or two from now, we're talking about long-term impacts. Shifting again is it's the right to be heard. We deal a lot with media, we deal a lot with different opposing groups in the media, and we recognize that the voices are getting louder with people wanting to be heard and wanting to collaborate and wanting to have an opportunity to get their opinions out there. We have, of course, what's shifting as well is the increased accessibility to information. We, with the internet and with everything that's shifted over the years, information's out there is positive, information's out there that's negative, some is true, some isn't true, and it's managing all that as we move forward with our communications. And as we know, whether it's a synergy group for or against different projects, strength in numbers is also what we're seeing is that's growing in that collaboration. I wanted to bring this up and show it to you. I discussed this with a number of our different clients. This came from a professor of mine at Royal Roads University, and what I want you to focus on is the 20-60-20 component. Is that we generally find that when you have a project or when you're putting something forward, is that you're going to have 20% of your people in general who are in support, often because they have something to gain or there's some economic benefit to the community. You have 60% of people that are neutral. They aren't impacted directly, or they don't have an interest in what you're talking about or the project at hand. And then you get 20% opposing the project. And what we find interesting is that you can engage all of these different groups, but within the opposing 20%, there's sometimes a protesting group, and they're the ones that we find are the bigger challenge to getting to the table to collaborate with. The evolving approaches for engagement. Some of the traditional forms of engagement aren't working, and it's not so much that they aren't working. What's happened is that they need to be either tweaked or they need to be not just independently done. We find that if you're just going into community and doing an open house or just sending out a newsletter, one-way communication isn't working. You need to actually do a number of different things. One thing on our website that you can download is there's a 2-page report, or not a report, but just a document that we've documented all the channels and tools for communication that we can pull together here. And that will help you with different ways of introducing new approaches and forms of communication. So just to wrap up, a strategic approach will give you your best opportunity to understand where you're headed, what is the best way that information will be received and shared, understanding who you're talking to and what the main concerns are that both you have and your stakeholders have. It allows you to implement the right tools and the right channels for communication, as well as it allows for more opportunities for creating that two-way dialogue that historically hasn't always been there. And the main thing is to never stop the engaging, be creative with your approaches, and base everything on your strategy so you can measure it, and that you can ensure success with your projects. Thank you.